If you've been wondering about traveling to the Philippines during the COVID-19 pandemic, this video is for you. My baby and I recently traveled to Manila from Canada, and I'd like to share with you our experience as non-OFWs arriving in the Philippines. For more videos and tips on travel and Canadian immigration, hit subscribe and watch my other videos in my channel. Let's start with the requirements to enter the Philippines nowadays. The Philippine government imposed temporary arrival restrictions due to the pandemic. This supersedes pre-COVID regulations, so pay close attention. As of August 9th, 2020, only Filipino citizens are allowed to enter the Philippines. If you're a dual citizen, then yes, you're allowed to enter because you're a Filipino after all. There's an update to this list effective November 1st, 2020, so make sure you check that out too. If you're a former Filipino or non-Filipino, as known as a foreigner, you need a visa even if you're an immediate relative to a Filipino citizen. This includes minor children. So contact the Philippine consulate near you to find out how you can apply for the visa. These are the documents that you need to present upon arrival in the Philippines. If you're a Filipino citizen, then of course, your Philippine passport. If you're a dual citizen and you don't have a Philippine passport, then you'll need to show your identification certificate. This is one of the documents that you receive from the Philippine consulate after you reacquire your Filipino citizenship. So that's after your oath taking. If you're a foreigner, you'll need to present your passport and the visa issued to you by the Philippine consulate. Here's the thing. My 20-month-old baby was technically a Filipino because I was a dual citizen when he was born. The thing is, I had nothing to show to prove his Filipino citizenship except my own Filipino citizenship, and I was told that they won't accept that. Upon arrival in the Philippines, the requirement was to show either his Philippine passport or his dual citizenship certificate or his PSA birth certificate. I had none of those. Even if my baby was automatically a Filipino citizen when he was born, apparently there were steps that we should have taken after he was born. We needed to report his birth to the Philippine consulate. So reporting my son's birth sounded easy. However, because we're 20 months late in reporting, extra steps were required, and we did not have enough time to do it before our flight. Thankfully, my husband was not a dual citizen yet, so we applied for his dual citizenship, and our son piggybacked on his adult application as his dependent. Problem solved. I want to give a shout out to the Philippine Consulate in Calgary for helping us through this. Consul General Zaldi Patron and his staff were very helpful, and we experienced nothing but excellent service while dealing with them. Salamat mga kabayan. Lesson learned. Report the birth of your Filipino baby. I'll make another video on the process of registering the birth of babies born of Filipino parents outside of the Philippines. So make sure you hit the subscribe button and the bell so you'll know when it's posted. So once you've confirmed that you're allowed to travel to the Philippines, it's time to prepare for the extra steps implemented by the IATF. Finding current and reliable information online, especially when it comes to regulations in the Philippines, was very challenging. I had to go through numerous sites, social media posts, and I ended up using the PAL website as a reference for the requirements. I didn't fly PAL. I haven't flown PAL to and from the Philippines because, number one, of their rates and their luggage limit. But regardless of who you fly with, PAL's website has very useful information. I'll include the link to the specific info in the details section. Now, use PAL's info as a guide, but heads up, some are no longer applicable or accurate. For example, I ended up buying internet on board the flight because I realized I didn't fill out the Red Cross information and get a QR code before takeoff. The instruction was to fill it out closer to your flight date, so I thought I'd leave it for the last minute. When we landed, it turned out that only OFWs were required to fill out that form. Ugh. Another thing you might need to do before your flight is to book a hotel to stay at while waiting for your test results. It's okay if you don't book ahead, but because I was traveling with a baby, I wanted to make sure we have a good place to stay. I'll include a link to the DOT list of quarantine hotels. Here are some of the things you'll need to consider when you book a hotel. Do they offer shuttle service? Private vehicles are not allowed to transport you from the airport to your hotel. So you'd have to decide whether you want the hotel provided one or take a cab. Hotel rates for airport pickup are higher than if you just took a cab, but I opted for the hotel shuttle, not only because I'm with my baby, but also because I had lots of luggages. I also wasn't thrilled with having to haggle with a taxi driver when we arrived. So, next thing to consider are your dining choices. Some hotels allow food ordered from outside, but most only will let you order from on-site restaurants. Something that you might also want to consider is whether or not the hotel you stay at has a contract with the government to host OFWs. This is something I learned from one of my clients. So, thank you, Mo, for the information. After an extensive search, I booked with Shangri-La at the fort, and I'm glad I did. Their rates are on the high side, but I got what I paid for. Actually, way more than what I paid for. From the staff to the food to the facilities, everything was excellent. Our room rate included airport pickup, in style, if I may add, and hotel credits, which I used for our meals. They were not contracted by the government to host OFWs, so the hotel was quiet and it gave me some kind of a reassurance that our exposure was very minimal because less people means less exposure. Before I share our actual travel experience, let me answer a question that you might have. Who should you fly with? If you're the type who only flies with PAL because it's direct, stick with that. If you're like me who flies with whoever gives me the best deal, during this pandemic, I find that you'll get better service and meals when you fly with Asian Airlines. So All Nippon Airways, or ANA, has been my favorite for the past couple of months. For this trip, we went with Air Canada for the long haul because I used my Aeroplan points and flew business class with my baby. If you want to find out how you can fly business class for $300, comment below and I'll line that up in my videos to do. I love flight food and I'm not picky. The meals we had were okay since we were in business class, but they could have done better and still keeping it safe, especially in business class. On the day that you fly, pre-COVID, if you check in at the airport at least 2 hours before an international flight, you're good. During this time, I suggest you go as early as 4 hours. Allow extra time for document checking. Everything is new and lots of regulations are ever changing, so the airport agents have to read through a 3-inch guidebook and act as if they're immigration officers. Some misinterpret guidelines. Most have to call their support hotline, especially if you're going to a country that's less traveled nowadays. These extra steps are making the airport agents cranky. It's very important that you're a knowledgeable traveler. Have info links handy. I'll share with you some of the links that were very useful to me during our trip. Be nice to agents, but be firm and stand your ground if they try to deny you boarding. So, again, be a knowledgeable traveler. In our case, the agent in Regina Airport didn't like that our dual citizenship contained the phrase not valid for travel. So she wanted to deny us boarding, but I insisted and she let us board because we had a 24-hour layover in Vancouver. So we needed to check in again the next day. And she passed the responsibility on to the next airport agent. She warned us that we may end up coming back tomorrow, but I was very confident we won't be. When you're on board, you'll find that there's plenty of room for social distancing in most flights. On our Regina to Vancouver leg, business class was full because there were only a few seats in the flight, but economy had plenty of space. On our Vancouver to Narita leg, there were not too many passengers. There were only about 5 or 6 of us in the business class, and economy had plenty of room. The Narita to Manila, though, economy was packed, but there were only 3 seats occupied in the business class. Upon arrival in Narita, all passengers with a connection were the first to deplane. We were grouped together and 2 ANA staff accompanied us through security check. After we passed security, we were then required to check in again for our next flight. It was kind of just a check that, we have an ongoing flight. There was a long lineup, and having just been through a 9-hour plus flight with a baby who needs to burn off his energy, the waiting in line wasn't fun. On our ANA Narita to Manila flight, 2 forms were distributed on board. I'm not going to mention the forms anymore because I can't remember what they were and it may have already changed by now. Basta, there were forms. One of them was the usual arrival card. After deplaning, we went through a temperature check, and the yellow form, I think it's a health declaration form, which was distributed on board, was given to the staff after the temperature check. We were then shepherded into the testing area. OFWs and non-OFWs had a separate waiting area, and the OFWs were prioritized. Red Cross administered the free test while the paid testing was done by Airport Diagnostics Lab. The cost of the test was 4,500 pesos per person, including babies. There were tons of forms to fill out, and this is where I discovered that the Red Cross form I filled out online, that QR code that they said you must have, was useless. That QR code, which I carefully saved on my phone, was of no use at all. Airport Diagnostics Lab also had a posted sign for their online form, but staff told us it was very glitchy, so we're better off filling out the forms manually. As someone who prefers to type than write, that was a bummer. After filling out the forms, you'll line up in the payment section. They will enter your data into their system, and the contact details you provide will be where they will send the test results. So make sure your email address and phone number is properly encoded. What I actually did was I watched over the shoulder of the encoder to make sure everything was A-OK. I also got an email from them after payment, so that's another way of making sure that they have the right info. The testing area is where you spend most of your time when you arrive. This is where the passenger's patience and attitude are tested. So they do both a mouth and a nose swab. I've experienced the nose swab already in Canada, so I kind of dreaded it. It's not painful, just very uncomfortable. I was especially dreading it for my baby. Another passenger who was a nurse gave me a tip to pick a certain testing booth because she noticed that that lady had light hands and was the gentlest of them all. God bless her heart. When our turn came, mine was done first, then my son's. His nose was done first, and of course, he cried. Who likes having a stick stuck deep into your nose? The crying helped with the mouth swab, though, because his mouth was wide open, so it was easier to take the sample. My son was a trooper. He only cried for a minute, and then he forgot all about it. Meantime, Mommy, up to now, still dreads another swab test. After the test was done, we headed to immigration where we had to show proof of entry requirements. It was a quick one. Next was the Department of Tourism booth, which was in the baggage claim area. This is where they confirm your hotel booking and help you book a hotel if you haven't prearranged it. This was also where we signed the affidavit and where it got notarized. While at the DOT booth, someone offered to pick up our luggages, and I gladly gave our claim stubs to him. With the number of luggages we had, I was more than happy to have help. Just as we were finished with the notarization, our luggages were picked up and ready to go. We went through customs, handed the affidavit to the officer, and that was it. Actually, that wasn't it yet. Outside, if you don't have hotel pickup, there's lots of taxis lined up. One of the highlights of the kind of service Shangri-La had was that we were picked up by a BMW X3. And since we had lots of luggages, it definitely won't fit the X3. Shangri-La staff coordinated with my staff in Manila so our own vehicle can tag along with their service vehicle. We ended up just bringing one suitcase to the hotel. As we were en route to the hotel, Mr. Driver closely coordinated with the hotel staff. Check-in procedure was done in car through a video call. When we got to the hotel, we were ushered directly to our room. We weren't given a room card because we weren't allowed to go out of our rooms. We arrived past midnight, so we hurriedly showered and dove into fresh seats and slept like a baby after that. I'd like to do a more thorough review of our accommodation, but it will make this video too long. So maybe I'm just going to do a separate video all about Shangri-La at the Fort's accommodation for arriving non-OFW passengers. Another one for my to-do list. Since we're not allowed to get out of our room, we ordered food for in-room dining and used our credits. The food at Shang was amazing. One of the reasons why I knew I made the right choice in booking with them. So my baby and I had a very leisurely morning the next day. We were expecting to stay at the hotel for 2 nights, but at around 11 a.m., I got an email from the lab with our negative results. So I contacted reception right away, and they facilitated the release of our Bureau of Quarantine certificate. They sent me a link to fill out some info on the BOQ website, and in less than an hour, we got our Bureau of Quarantine certificate and we were cleared for checkout. Did I already say that the staff at Shangri-La Hotel were amazing? Our checkout was a breeze and we were out of the hotel quarantine in less than 24 hours. We then continued our 14-day quarantine, of course, but at the comfort of our home. Now, the info I shared here is only applicable up to Manila. If you've got onward travel to the province, there are different rules, and I won't recommend you coming to the Philippines if Manila is not your final destination. The mandatory quarantine in provinces is done in designated facilities, so you definitely can't expect 5-star accommodation. Comment below if you have reliable info on provincial procedures for non-OFW arrivals. There you have it, the arrival procedures we experienced in September 2020 in Manila. I hope this helps you decide if you're going to travel to the Philippines to visit your loved ones or to push through a planned vacation that was previously postponed or canceled. Travel during COVID 19 is possible. However, pack lots of patience, adaptability, cool composure, and willingness to spend money for the extra steps you have to take to travel. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and the bell. Thank you so much for watching my video. Bye for now and take care.